We all know that sharing our journeys is one of the most powerful things that you can do to connect you to your target audience. But all too often, I run across individuals that say they either don't know what to share, they're not sure even where to start. They're afraid to come out of their shell because the thought of going live or posting about themselves is just too far outside their comfort zone. But think about how powerful your journey is and how, if you took the time to write it down, how much of an impact it could possibly make on somebody else, and even more so, inspire them to share their own journey. Hi, I'm Joyce Lehman, and I help entrepreneurs and coaches to create a solid brand foundation so they can stand out online, sell more services, and make a bigger impact without the overwhelm. Today, I'm going to be sharing tips and tactics and taking you behind the scenes of 5 easy ways that you can share your journey and inspire others to do the same. So yes, sharing your journey is incredibly powerful. And as a speaker and trainer back in the early years of my business, 2007, 2008, I knew I needed to do it. And if it's something that puts you out of your comfort zone, and I totally understand putting yourself out there, because I used to be that former wallflower in the world of business networking. If you put a microphone in front of my hand, even in front of a group of 5 people, I would physically shake. But then when I learned the power of story and its ability to connect, and that authentic connection that's so important, especially in today's online world, that's why I want to share with you not only the process, but also 5 different ways to share your story. So if you want the show notes, then please post show notes in the comments below, because I'm going to be going through this quickly. I do not have a workbook for this, unlike I do in my regular workshops. So post show notes and will make sure and get them to you. So the first thing that I want to start off with is the process of how you create your story and share it. Now, as I said, I used to be the wallflower in the world of business networking. Public speaking was my greatest fear. And since that time, I have not only worked with an amazing speaking coach, that was back in 2007, but I have spoken on national stages across the country. I've also presented at TEDx. And of course, I go weekly live within trainings within my private group, and of course, out to YouTube. So the first process part of it that I want to share with you is what my speaking coach taught me back in 2007. So when you're thinking about sharing your journey, and there are many facets when it comes down to sharing your journey, trying to wrap everything up into a short video is probably not going to happen or go well. So think about your journey as being made up of multiple stories. And if you haven't told your story before, then the easiest thing to do is to think about, as your business, it's like, what was it that started you to get excited about your particular business? What was it? I call it my there to hear story. It's what I created for my TEDx talk. So think about where you started. What was the frustration? What compelled you to get interested in the business that you do today? Because there's always that part of where you are and then where you end up. And it's that journey that you take people on that, say, for example, you're sharing this particular story because you're wanting to engage with a potential client. And by the way, that's the power of live, is not being able to edit. But when you're wanting to share with a potential client, then it's also giving them those details so they go, oh, I might be able to do this too. But more importantly, that you can relate to them because you've been there on their journey. So that's the very first thing, is think there to hear. But think about one event. And as Darren used to tell me, you want to have that one point that you're trying to make. All too often when we tell stories, it's different if you're having a conversation with friends or family or whoever, business associate, and you're in a relaxed setting and you have time to give all the nitty-gritty details. When you think about if you're going live or if you're sharing it at a post or on your website, it's about how you get to the important pieces of this. So as I said, depending on, you think there to here, where did you start and how did you get here? Within that, there's going to be multiple stories, but always think it's like, what's that one thing? What's that one point in that particular story that you're trying to get people to remember? So this could be a funny thing. It could be an inspirational thing. It could be the leave your audience in tears, the compelling thing, but start writing down the things that you remember. As I said, one of the easiest things to do is say, this is where I started. This is why I got interested in the business that I'm doing. And this is where I am now, because then you can relate it back to your clients. As an example, a couple of other stories, because sometimes things happen and you're not quite sure how they make sense, but they make sense as a part of it. So as I said, for me, pushing comfort zones, I used to be like Sheldon Cooper on the couch. I liked my schedule very set. I was in outside sales. I didn't want anything to change. I could tell you what was on television every night of the week. And then what I would eat for dinner, it was all extremely predictable. One of the stories I would tell is how I got out of my comfort zone was having my mother in a nursing home and being the on-call person. I won't get into all the details, but that was one way that I would share that story of how did I get out of being a wallflower? How did I get out of my comfort zone or getting out of such a rigid schedule? So that goes back to, at the end, I'm going to give you 5 different ways, but kind of think about your stories, the audience that you are sharing it with, and what's the point you're trying to make. So as I said, the story about mom was, how did it get me out of my rigid schedule, be more flexible? I also tell the story in my TEDx talk, There to Here is Just Another Leap. And the story was, I was on the Odyssey hike course, terrified of heights. A friend talked me into going on this business adventure that one of the local chambers was doing. And so it was spending the day 35 feet in the air, completely terrified, that helped me realize that I could push comfort zones. So how I translate that in what I do today, in the beginning, I was in my business because I wanted to do training on performance mindset. So when you're talking about pushing comfort zones, that was so important to help people see I did something that terrified me to no end. And then I applied it with the work that I was doing with the Pacific Institute to help myself and my clients get to where I need to be. That was in another lifetime when all I was speaking on is performance mindset. So as I said, could be something, think about something that you had that literally scared you. And then you're like, and that's how I applied it in my business, or that's what got me thinking in this business. But it always gets into think one thing, start with one story. You don't want to give somebody the entire story unless it's in a book, fabulous. But if you've only got a few minutes, or if you've only got your website, then it's super important that you keep that very condensed. So start by thinking about one event. That's the very first thing that you want to do. And then another thing to keep in mind is, as you're thinking about that one event, there's a good chance that other memories are going to pop up. So one of the things my speaking coach taught me, Darren LaCroix, who I still love and adore, is to keep a story file. Now, at the beginning, because it was back in 2007 and social media, and all the apps on the phone wasn't the thing, I actually would have a story file, and it was in a Word document on my desktop. Darren always said, track your story file, because something may happen that's interesting that you can use that story at some point, but typically there's a triggering event that happens. Now I keep it in notes on my phone, and then if I want to expand on it, then I go into Evernote. So as I said, think about one thing. The second tip when it comes into the process of crafting your story is write, don't edit. You want to write and not try to edit it, because all too much at the beginning, what happens is we start to write, especially if you haven't shared your story before, and then you're wondering, you find yourself catching yourself saying, is somebody going to find it interesting? I'm afraid to put it out there. Write, don't edit. You always have the chance to go back and polish it, and within that, you're going to pull out the necessary points. You're also going to be able to find out, is this getting too wordy? Now, as an example, say you've been asked to speak at a local chamber and you're using a speaking opportunity to get your story out there because they love what you've done in business and they want to hear more about you. Know that you talk on average 100 words per minute. I learned this when I was actually competing in the Toastmasters International Speech Competition back in 2007. We had to deliver a 5 to 7 minute talk. If you went 7 minutes and 1 second, you were disqualified from the competition. So even though, say, for example, you're presenting at a workshop or you've been asked to speak for a local chamber or professional organization, and somebody wants to know the background and how you got started in your business and where you're at, as you're writing it out, know that, of course, if you know your business well and you know your story well, but truly writing it out, this is how you can see that it's 100 words per minute. You want to stick with the most impactful things up front. And then the big thing is the end, going back to leave them with one clear message. People remember stories so much easier than they remember stats and all of the tactical stuff. It's the stories that are going to impact them more. So, but one point is what you want them to end on. As an example, TEDx, the whole of the talk, or the title of the talk was "There to Here is Just Another Leap." The call to action that I left people with, just take the leap. The whole point of TEDx, it was about getting outside your comfort zone. But all too often, we talk about comfort zones, but just take the leap. So that goes back to, what's the introduction? Depending on how long you have to deliver this, say, for example, if you've got 5 minutes, you better have an opening, you better have an ending, and you better make 1 to 2 points that are very impactful in the beginning versus trying to cram all this stuff into one. So that's why, first off, just write, don't edit. Once it's on paper, then that makes it easier to go in and then flesh out kind of the information that you know are truly your strong points. This is definitely, as I said, it's if you're introverted or you're terrified of sharing your story in public, this is where that doubt can creep in. So part of it too is, once you get your story done, then you're going to want to make sure and share it with those who are trusted around you, your trusted circle of advisors. And by the way, if you happen to catch a nugget in the midst of this, then post #nugget, because I always love to hear people's takeaways as we're going through these trainings. Okay, now, going back to, I put my story file in notes if I happen to be out on the road and something happens. One of the places that I love to keep stories now is over in Evernote. Some people love Word docs. That's great. Go ahead and put it there. If you're putting it in a Word doc, always back it up. The last thing you want to do is go through all the effort of creating this amazing story about a part of your journey, and then you lose all the work that you've done. So always back it up. So now it goes back to how you're going to polish it. So you think of one thing, just write and don't edit. And oh, by the way, another hack you can use is, if writing isn't your thing, download a recording app on your phone. I actually did this when I wrote my second book, and I managed to publish a 221 page business book, took it from no words on paper to fully published on my doorstep. By the way, there's a fabulous story about promising a conference organizer that my second book was going to be published in 6 months, and I hadn't started on it. So I had 35 days to make this happen. But a recording app is a fabulous way to do this, because then you can use something like HappyScribe, that once you've got it recorded, you just upload it to HappyScribe, and then it will kick out, it's super inexpensive too, and then it will kick out a transcription for you. And for me, for my brain, that worked better, because that way, as I said, if you just let the words flow, then I had it transcribed, then I was able to go in and polish it up. So make sure, as I said, you want a story that's interesting to follow. Using you words in the process, that's one of those keynote speaker tricks that, and I shouldn't even say tricks, it's just one of the things that keynote speakers know well, because we had to craft keynotes that kept an audience compelled when we're standing on the stage and there's hundreds of thousands of people out here. So talking you, using the words you, then even if you've got a room of 1,000 people and you're looking at one person and you're saying you, or if somebody's reading this text, and I'm going to show you on my website, one of the ways to use this. But when you do that, it actually engages. So as I said, think about, so you've got your setup, have your points. So depending on how much space you have or the medium that you're delivering this in, then that's going to determine the number of points. And then you want to make sure it is clear and concise. It's so easy for us to get caught up in the details. The problem is you're going to end up losing individuals in the process. So there are lessons. So think about what the lesson is in the story. If something was funny, what's the lesson? If something was sad, what's the lesson? If something was inspiring, or even, I talk about it in the first chapter of my book, my $23,000 mistakes that I made in the process of building my business when I started in 2008 and spending all the wrong money on all the wrong things with all the wrong coaches who promised the world and didn't deliver a whole lot. So that happens to be a story in my book. I do share a condensed story of that when I am doing workshops because people want to know how I got my expertise. So as I said, think about what was the lesson learned, because that's the lesson that you can share with somebody and say, what is your story or what is your lesson learned in the process? Also, and I did keep, I know we're talking about the power of story, but I made sure and took notes on this one because I want to know that I'm staying on track. So going back to, once you either transcribe it, as I said, you're going to record it on your phone, you're going to transcribe it, you're going to polish it up, then, or say you're doing this in a video. A lot of times that's going to be one of the mediums and you want to share it there. Know that you've got your points. For me, depending on the content that I have, there are times that with this, I want to be specific. So I actually have some notes to make sure that I stay on track. When I'm sharing that particular piece of my story within my workshop, then that's something that I know by heart and I know how to keep it super close. So I don't have to have notes. If you're going to go live, that depends on the audience that, as I said, keep it to main bullet points. All right. So now that you have your process, go through the process. This is so very important. Then you can share it in multiple ways. The beautiful thing about sharing a part of your journey is you can actually repurpose this. So first off, think about the medium, and the medium might be where you're most comfortable right now. I will tell you, I say this all the time, live video is so important in today's world. Couple of things. First off, it helps to create that authentic connection. If you're out on LinkedIn, you can use LinkedIn native video through the LinkedIn app on your phone. If you're on Facebook, you can go Facebook Live on your phone. You can go Facebook Live on a laptop. I just do this here because it's easy. When I post reels, I will do reels here, or I may upload, or I may take a video and it's going to be one. So within reels, I can go 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds. So that's going to be like one tiny point within a particular story. So the medium is going to determine on the amount of room that you have, where you're going to put that. So one of the ways I want to show you too is sharing your story on your website. So as an example, on the Meet Joyce page on my site, so this is a little bit different. I don't start with business coaching. I don't start talking about sales and marketing, because for me, this is back to that very beginning. I believe that when you change your thoughts, you can change your life. I went through that experience with the Pacific Institute. Even though I don't talk on performance mindset, one of the biggest things I help clients with right now is a mindset shift, because if you've got to put yourself out there online, you're afraid to go live on video, those are all comfort zone things. Then I also have official titles that are in here. And then I give that, having launched my current business during the last recession with over 25 years of varied business experience. So it's like, how do you wrap that up? It comes back to connection. And then here is this call to action at the end. So think about, as I said, if you are on your website, you're going to be sharing your story in a different way. If, for example, I'm going to take you over here for just a minute. And if you're going to go to a particular, say, for example, I'm going to send you over to LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a very different medium, right? Website's going to be a little bit more personal. You want the professional side, but you want it to be more personal. Within LinkedIn, when you get in here, then The value statement up top, that's the value you deliver. That isn't necessarily the story that you have to share. So as you go down, then yes, and there's so much, there's so much to see. But part of this is, if you're thinking about on your LinkedIn profile, in your summary section, it's important to share a part of that journey so clients can see your experience and expertise and how you can help them. That's very different, as I said, than what's on the website, because it's a slightly different audience that I'm going after. But I've also made my summary section, and I know this isn't a LinkedIn training, but I've also made my summary section a lot about them. But right here in the beginning, I started my business in 2008 without a brand or a network. So I kind of wrapped up Pacific Accord or Pacific Institute in there. So think about, as I said, depending on the medium that you have, I'm going to stop sharing there. So depending on the medium that you have, then that's what's going to determine the length. It's going to determine the tone. You may have that the same journey. You might share different facets of your story. So think about that. All right. Blog or a podcast. So a blog, that can be more personal. You can take up more length. It goes back to, if you want to keep somebody's attention, then get to the meat, get to that point and see how it's relatable to them, versus, oh, let me tell you about a time when I did blah, blah, blah. Start it off with have you ever experienced this? Or can you relate to this? And then you're going to tell your story. But as I said, always have that interesting opening, a couple of points, and then that call to action. Podcast, that depends on, if somebody's introducing you, it's not your podcast and somebody's introducing you, how can you share the important parts of your journey in your bio, depending on if they're promoting it, also in the introduction. As an example, when I was doing keynotes, my bio was slightly different than how I was being introduced to the audience. So if you have the opportunity to do a podcast, then consider how you can write that. And part of that, it's that teaser that you want to get somebody thinking, ooh, I want to learn more. Not only are you an expert in your particular space or industry, but it's the backstory. It's what got you there as to why they should really listen to you. So, okay, I also talked about Facebook post, live, Instagram story. If you're not used to going live, then sharing your story can feel uncomfortable. So a couple of things that you can do is, say, for example, if you set up a private Facebook group and you're the only person in the group, you can practice going live in the group. So that would be a way to warm yourself up. Or get Zoom. Get Zoom, start a Zoom, talk to yourself, and then record it. It's so important. That's the other thing, is if you're going to be sharing your story live, record it. It is one of the most uncomfortable things that you can do, but it is such an important thing when you're going to be sharing your story different ways, is because you want to make sure that when you're saying it out loud, that you're comfortable with the process. So as I said, we talk about 100 words per minute. It's important that if you're going to go live, even if you have like a 3x5 card and you put your opening, your 3 bullet points, and then your ending, but pay attention to the clock as well, because the more you ramble on, you could lose somebody in that way. All right, so an interview with a local media outlet. I actually had Voyager Casey. I've had 2 media publications reach out to me, and they want me to share my story. The interesting thing about these publications is they're putting it back on me, and they want me to write it. Well, guess what? They're going to publish it exactly as it's written. So it's something that I didn't want to simply complete the 10 questionnaires that they are questionnaire to complete the questionnaire that had 10 questions, because they kept saying, this is so simple. It'll only take you 15 minutes. If I want to tell my story in an impactful way, then I want to make sure that I've got time, as I said, to get the most important points across. So also think about, and I've mentioned this, say, for example, you're delivering a webinar, maybe you're delivering a live workshop. If you tell your story, that is different than introducing yourself and your credentials. One of the biggest fails I see, in fact, I worked with a client on this today because she's got a workshop that's coming up. And it's, even though it's a freebie, it's leading into a paid. But one of the biggest mistakes that I see, and I also saw this a lot when I was presenting keynotes and doing trainings within other companies, and I'd go to an event and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe this. It's not about you. Don't start with, here's my background and here's my credentials. Asking that question and putting it out there and saying, can you relate, and drawing the audience in that way, that's what's going to get people's attention. That's why story is so powerful. Not necessarily the credentials you have, it's the backstory that got you there in the first place. So going back, as I said, and if you write your story out once, then you can repurpose it in so many ways. So as an example, my website is one facet of the story that also ties in with my book. My LinkedIn profile is just a little bit different because it's a professional network. When I'm sharing my story during a conversion event, it depends on, like my visibility boost workshop, that's, the story that I share in there, which is just one piece in my journey, is different than when I do my boot camp. And it's like, why would you want to invest with me? And that's where I put everything on the table and go, look, when I started my business in 2008, I made so many mistakes and I've invested with so many people over the time. I thought I could never do tech, and I was terrified to speak in public. And it was learning all these things and aligning myself with the right coaches and learning this that I can actually help you shorten your learning curve. So as I said, that is a different story during a conversion event. So think about who your audience is and how you're going to go about sharing it, the medium that you're going to share it on. So to recap, because the recap is so important with this. All right. When you share your journey, then start with one thing. Start with one thing, one instance, one story that comes to mind, one experience that you've had. Just start there. The second thing is, don't edit it. Don't mentally edit it. Just write and let the words flow. If you end up using, as I said, an app on your phone that you can record and then transcribe, super, super, super easy to do. So write your thoughts down and see where they take you, and then edit it after the fact, because you can always go back and revise them later. But put it in the framework of, this is where I started, this is what I did, and this is where I'm at now. So I call it there to here. So this is, that's where I started back there. These are the steps that I took, and this is where I'm at today. So that is a great framework to use. And then remember, make it clear and concise. You would be amazed at how much that we can shorten it down. And that was a big lesson for me in the Toastmasters International Speech Competition, because we had to cram as much as we could, get to the point. Not only were we being judged on the topic and how we delivered it, but it was every nuance within that, from eye contact, body language, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into that today. Clearly, I need to do another live, because part of that physical delivery is huge, especially if you're in front of a live audience. So, but the big thing is, get it out there. If you want somebody to look at it, that's great. Know you can repurpose it in multiple ways, but then that's where you just need to practice. If you've not been live, record yourself on Zoom, set up a private Facebook group that you're the only member, practice going live. The cool thing about LinkedIn is you can always record a native video and then you can delete it before you actually post it. On Reels, it's the same thing. Record on your phone. That's huge. And then you can upload and edit it from there. And if you end up doing the short form content, then here's a great tip, by the way. So if you watched this to the end, so you can actually do something like, the wording for the post would be the 5 things I learned building my business as, in my case, as a business coach. So within that, then each of those tips can become an individual content piece, or you could do reels, like 15-second reels, or even YouTube, like the short shelf, 15-second YouTube videos that you share each one of those tips. So talk about condensing your story down. So as I said, like the 5 things I learned, or the 3 things I learned, or the 3 things I most important learned, the 3 most important things I learned. But it's that you got to think about the title that's also going to get somebody's attention. All right. So with that, because if you're sitting here going, I hate to write, I can't handle writing, I've written 2 books. Writing is not my thing. However, I have my favorite AI tool ever that when I'm writing blog posts, video scripts, whatever it might be, even though I have me, I've got my little AI tool back up. So if you would love to be part of a training, I'm doing a training and I'm also going to have the recording available, then make sure that you comment AI in the chat notes. So I've got that. And of course, you can always reach out to me, my website at joycelehman.com, send me a message there, or just find me on social at Joyce Lehman. So with that, I really, really, really appreciate your time today, whether you showed up live or you're showing up replay. And by the way, I always love to know because I have people tell me that they can't always get here live, but they make it on a replay. So if by chance you happen to catch the replay, put hashtag replay. Let me know about any nuggets that you have. I truly appreciate your time and I look forward to hearing about your journey.